welcome again to yet another lecture on drama and its types. Before we begin, let me ask you something. Have you ever watched a play or a film where the characters seem to be moving through a dreamlike world, or where the dialogue felt more like a philosophical debate rather than everyday conversation? If your answer is yes, then wonderful, you have already stepped into the world we are going to explore today. So today we are examining tragi-comedy, expressionist drama, and the drama of ideas. These are three powerful dramatic forms that encouraged audience to think, to question, and feel in entirely new ways. If we place these three dramatic forms in the historical context, although Shakespeare was crafting tragi-comedy as early as the 1600, but it took nearly 3 more centuries for theatre to develop the innovation of expressionism and idea-driven drama. In fact, these modern forms emerged when artists began to realize that traditional theatre was no longer enough to express the complexity, or you can say the confusion, and maybe the emotional intensity of modern life. As a result, uh, you can say these dramatic forms did far more than simply tell stories. They are not telling stories only, but they challenged audience to reflect, to question, and you can say experience emotions in an unfamiliar way. And with that, we begin our journey into these exciting and transformative forms of drama. Tragi-comedy, which is the earliest and most historically rooted of these three dramatic forms we are discussing today. At very first glance, the term may appear deceptively very simple. Uh, for instance, if you look at the word tragi-comedy, it might seem to suggest a straightforward fusion of tragedy and comedy. However, in reality, it represents a far more nuanced and sophisticated dramatic mode. If we put it simply, tragicomedy is a dramatic form that combines the emotional depth of tragedy with the humor and resolution of comedy. And because of this, it offers a complex yet realistic picture of human life, a picture of human life where joy and sorrow coexist in a single frame. In a more formal sense, we may define tragicomedy as a dramatic genre that blends the emotional gravity of tragic situations with that restorative, often uplifting possibilities of comic resolution. And with this in mind, let us look at its key characteristics. So these are the key features we have. These are the key features of tragi-comedy. And the first one, let's begin with engagement with serious or potentially catastrophic situations. Tragi-comedy often present circumstances that seems to be moving towards that tragic downfall. For instance, there are threats of death, loss, separation, or maybe a moral collapse. Yet, unlike a pure tragedy, these crises are ultimately diffused, or you can say resolved in a way that ultimately it restores the harmony. The next characteristics is inclusion of characters across social hierarchies. While classical tragedy traditionally focused on noble or you can say high-born protagonist, tragi-comedy embraces a broader social spectrum. In this genre, kings, commoners, clowns, courtiers, they all may coexist within the same narrative space. So it reflects a more democratic and you can say inclusive vision of human experience. The next feature is interweaving of comic relief with genuine emotional depth. Here, in a tragi-comedy, moments of humor, irony, or playful banter are strategically placed. And they placed alongside those scenes of tensions and pathos. Importantly, these tonal shifts do not trivialize the seriousness of the main plot. In fact, they create a layered emotional landscape that keeps the audience both engaged and slightly unsettled. Furthermore, the last feature on the slide is exploration of themes such as redemption, reconciliation, and renewal. Tragi-comedy often gravitates towards the emotional restoration. As a result, characters who appear doomed are granted the second chance. Always there is a second chance in the story. The fractured relationships are repaired and the narrative move towards the forgiveness. The focus is more on forgiveness rather than fatality. So these are the main features of tragi-comedy. Now, as we move into the historical development of tragi-comedy, we find that this genre has evolved over many centuries. In fact, its long journey reflects that the theatre was constantly attempting to portray the mixed or often contradictory nature of human experience. From the very beginning, there were traces of tragi-comedy and they were appearing in the classical drama as well. We find that Greek playwrights occasionally blended the serious themes with those lighter moments. Historically speaking, the term tragi-comedy was first used by Roman playwright Plautus in his play Amphitryon. And in this work, he described a work that mixed gods and mortals and mixed the seriousness and humor. Centuries later, during the Renaissance period, Italian writer Giovanni Battista Guarini, he refined the concept in his famous work, play. And he defined tragi-comedy as a play that presents danger without death and tension and without any despair. If we talk about England, William Shakespeare has elevated the genre through his important works such as The Merchant of Venice, The Winter's Tale, and most importantly, The Tempest. In all these plays, tragic elements like betrayal, loss, and moral conflict All these elements eventually give way to reconciliation and renewal. One of the most famous example is Shakespeare's The Winter Tale, and this play begins with King Lear's destructive jealousy and apparent tragedy. But this play later transformed into a kind of pastoral comedy that was filled with that humor and forgiveness. So the miraculous reunion of Hermione and King Leon's at the end beautifully illustrate the genre's balance between suffering and redemption. Beyond Shakespeare, there were many playwrights who expanded the reach of tragicomedy. And the examples are John Fletcher. He actually adapted Guarani's model for English audiences with the name The Faithful Shepherdess. And as we move into the 17th century, this genre continued to develop, especially in France. However, during the 18th and the 19th century, tragicomedy declined in prominence. Although many of its features were already absorbed into sentimental comedy and domestic tragedy, we found the traces of tragicomedy in both these types. Henrik Ibsen, the famous playwright, he used irony in his plays to intensify that emotional impact. On the other side, Anton Chekhov, the famous Russian playwright, in his plays like Uncle Vanya and Cherry Orchard, portrayed everyday despair with that subtle humor. If we talk about the revival, a major revival occurred in the 20th century when modernist and absurdist playwrights such as Samuel Beckett and Harold Pinter, these playwrights used tragicomedy to express that uncertainty, irony and existentialism of modern life. You can say in essence tragicomedy is present the contradictions of life. It has capacity for both pain and laughter. And that's the reason that it remains one of the most human and timeless form of drama. Now, as we turn to our another form or the type of drama, and that is expressionist drama, we see that it emerged in the early 20th century. Primarily in Germany between 1910 and 1925. This genre came out, or this type came out as a bold artistic reaction against that realism and naturalism. While realist theatre tried to reproduce the external world with that photographic accuracy, expressionist dramatists argued that the stage should reveal inner truth rather than the outer appearances. In other words, the aim was to dramatize the emotional and spiritual turmoil of modern life. And this turmoil was shaped by that rapid industrialization, growing urban alienation and deep trauma of World War I. So instead of showing life as it looks, expressionist drama attempted to show life as it feels. The main focus is on feeling. And to achieve this, playwrights introduced several innovative techniques such as distorted or exaggerated settings, because these settings help to reflect the inner mental state. We also have symbolic or archetypal characters like the father, the clerk or the stranger without any name. If we talk about the dialogues are fragmented so that they can express that emotional intensity. The playwright use that harsh lighting, heightened tension, angular movements, and the scenes are arranged like dreams or maybe the nightmares. You never feel that it is like a realistic sequences. So through these techniques, expressionist drama created a theater of intensity, a theater that exposed the anxieties of individuals who is struggling under this mechanized society, or this under those oppressive institution, or maybe with their own fractured identities. So the focus was much more on uh, to showcase that emotional and spiritual turmoil in place of showing the reality of life. So this type of drama was totally a reaction against the realism and naturalism. As we explore the development of expressionist drama, we find that it emerged in the early 20th century as part of a broader cultural movement, and that we already have discussed in our previous slide. And this cultural movement sought to break away from the strict realism, and this strict realism was dominating European theatre at that point of time. During this period, Germany became the center of this artistic shift, and especially between 1905 and 1910. It was the time that when writers and dramatists began reacting. They began reacting strongly against that mechanization, materialism, and you can say a kind of social fragmentation. And this fragmentation was brought about by that rapid industrialization. And secondly, the devastation of World War I, which further intensified this feeling of dissatisfaction. So all these circumstances, all this situation, pushing playwrights to search for a new dramatic form, which can be capable of expressing the psychological and emotional crisis of modern life. And in its earliest phase, which is often referred to as proto-expressionism, the movement appeared in the works of playwrights like Frank Wedekind, and his plays like Spring Awakening and the Lulu plays. These plays used bold and anti-realistic techniques to expose that social hypocrisy and inner turmoil. But as we move on, by the 1910, Expressionism had become a fully defined movement. And there were playwrights such as George Kaiser and Ernest Toller. They emerged as the leading voices of expressionist drama. And Kaiser's famous play From Morn to Midnight, which came out in 1912, and Toller's play Man and the Masses, which came out in 1920, these plays demonstrated the movement's emphasis on symbolic characters, its episode kind of structure, and intense emotional expression, most importantly. In these works, we had detailed realism was rejected in favor of that distortion, exaggeration, and dream-like sequences. And the purpose of these plays was to reveal the inner truth of human experience. And as we move into the 1920s, Expressionism began to spread beyond Germany. In the United States, we had playwrights like Eugene O'Neill and Elmer Rice. And these playwrights adapted these expressionist techniques to explore the theme of alienation and identity, and particularly in an increasingly industrial society. Eugene O'Neill's play The Hairy Ape, which came out in 1922, and the Rice play The Edding Machine, which came out in 1923, both these plays used that stylized settings, mechanical rhythm, and symbolic characters to basically critique modern capitalism and the loss of individuality. Although the movement declined in Germany after the rise of Nazism, but its influence continued to shape even after in those later theatrical forms. And these later theatrical forms were epic theatre, absurdist theatre, and various trends of avant-garde performances. By the mid 20th century, Expressionist drama had left a powerful and lasting legacy. Its innovation in staging or character and maybe in narrative. These innovations altogether opened the door for modern theatre. Modern theatre, which can explore the psychological depth, fragmented identity, and the anxieties of contemporary life. Even today, expressionist techniques appear in that experimental theatre, or you can say films and other kind of visual storytelling. And that's the quality of expressionism which make it one of the most transformative movement in dramatic history. So to begin our discussion of our next type of drama, and that is drama of ideas, it is important to understand that this form of theatre, which we called drama of ideas, also known as the problem play, or you can say discussion play, or drama of thought. So this type of drama places its central focus not on the plot or the action, but on the exploration of intellectual, social, or political ideas. So instead of relying on traditional dramatic conflict, these plays revolve around the clashes of beliefs. The clashes of beliefs, ideologies, and principles. So in this sense, characters here often function as a representative of these particular viewpoints. They are not only those characters which represent a human being or particular class, but they represent those particular viewpoints. And they turn the stage into a platform for examining the major questions and you can say dilemmas of modern society. As we move to its philosophical foundation, the drama of ideas is built on the belief that theatre can serve as a forum for public reasoning. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the rise of modern science, rational inquiry, and social reform movements, all these elements encourage the playwrights to use the stage as a space for intellectual exploration. So rather than offering escapist entertainment, these plays aimed to provoke the thought. They aimed to challenge the assumption and encourage the audiences to reconsider the accepted norms of the society. And this intellectual shift was strongly influenced by key thinkers and playwrights. Henrik Ibsen, for instance, He questioned the social hypocrisy. GB Shaw, another name. He used wit and argument to expose that moral contradictions. And philosophers such as Henry Bergson and J.S. Mill, they shaped the broader climate of ideas about freedom. And Mill actually shaped the broader climate of ideas not only about the freedom but also about that morality and social progress. And as a result, dialogue in these plays become, you can say, the primary vehicle of meaning, and these meanings are often sharp and argumentative. The purpose of these dialogues was to reflect the playwright's intention to engage the audience in a kind of critical reflection. So, at its core, the drama of ideas transformed theatre into a living conversation about society, ethics, and human responsibility. So here in this kind of play, drama of ideas, it invites viewers not merely to watch a story unfold, but to think, to evaluate the situation and question the social conventions. And that's the reason it remains one of the most intellectually stimulating forms of modern drama. About its historical development. The drama of ideas grew out of a time when theatre was beginning to change. For many years, plays usually focused mainly on actions, emotions, and everyday life. However, as the world moved into the 19th century and the society itself was transforming, and the reason was industrialization, scientific discoveries, and new political movements, which surely created some fresh questions about, you can say, morality, freedom, and more importantly, about social responsibility. So people were debating on issues like women's rights, class inequality, and the role of religion. And as these debates grew, playwrights realized that the stage could become more than a place for entertainment. The stage can become a space for serious thought. It can become a space for serious arguments, discussion. And at this point, Henrik Ibsen emerged as a major turning force. He is often being called the father of drama of ideas. Ibsen used his plays to question the social norms and challenge those traditional beliefs. His works like A Doll's House and Ghost, in his works he created characters who represented different viewpoints. And these viewpoints allow the audience to witness a kind of moral and social debate. And this debate was on stage. Through this shift, drama began to focus less on dramatic action and more on the clash of ideas. Following Ibsen, we have GB Shaw, who carried the movement forward with even greater boldness. Because Shah believed that drama should educate as well as entertain. And his plays such as Pygmalion and Major Barbara, they were filled with those sharp discussion, and these discussions were more about politics, economics, and human behavior. So as a result, the stage became a platform where arguments, philosophies and social questions took center stage. The dialogues in these plays become the moving force, and characters often acted as voice of different beliefs. And as we move into the early 20th century, the drama of ideas spread across Europe and America. It was not limited to a single place only. And playwrights used theatre to respond to world war, economic crisis and rapid scientific progress. And because of these global changes, drama became a tool for exploring the human condition in a complex modern world. And this form which was developed had these cleared features. The purpose of this play was to make the audience think deeply about the society. In the end, the drama of ideas transformed theatre into a place of intellectual engagement, and its influence can still be seen today in modern plays, films, even web series. Every visual thing that explore ethical dilemmas and the social issues and philosophical questions. So it marked a moment when drama became not just a story but a conversation with the audience. Understand how the drama of ideas works in practice, it will be helpful to look at a few important plays that shaped this form. And let's begin with Henrik Ibsen's A Doll's House, which stands as one of the earliest and strongest examples. In this play, the central conflict is not driven by any physical action, but by the main character Nora. Nora's growing awareness of her restricted role in society. And through this internal struggle, Ibsen raises a question about marriage, about gender expectations and personal freedom. So this play become a kind of debate about whether individuals should obey social norms or follow their own conscience. In this way, Ibsen uses the characters as voices for larger social issue rather than simply as participants in a plot. Moving forward, let's take another example, and this example is Pygmalion. Pygmalion is a famous play by George Bernard Shaw, and this play offers another clear example of drama of ideas. Although the story follows the transformation of Eliza Doolittle, Shaw's real purpose is to explore that class division, language and more importantly the identity. So the conversation between Higgins and Eliza often resemble the arguments about society rather than those ordinary dialogues. So as a result, the audience is encouraged to think about how social status is constructed and whether personal worth should depend on speech, should depend on birth. So this witty debates by Shaw's play, it turns the stage into a kind of space for intellectual discussion. There are other playwrights such as Arthur Miller or Bertolt Brecht. We see that how drama of ideas continue to evolve, and Miller's famous play, The Crucible, for example, uses the Salem witch trials to explore the theme of hysteria, integrity, and social pressure. Another example can be Brecht, who used his plays to challenge audience to think critically about politics and society. So through these developments, the drama of ideas expanded beyond personal conflicts to address broader social and political questions. So taken together, all these examples show that drama of ideas is defined not by action, but it is more defined by the thought. And each play use characters, dialogues, and conflict, and the purpose is to explore important questions, and the questions about society, morality, and human behavior. So in the end, the audience is invited not just to watch a story, but to engage with the ideas that shape the world around them. We come to the end of today's session. It becomes clear that each of the dramatic forms that we have explored in today's session, whether it is tragi-comedy, expressionist drama, and the drama of ideas, three of these dramatic forms, they opened new pathways for theatre to grow. If we talk about tragi-comedy, it showed us it shows us that life is rarely purely joyful or purely tragic, but it is a mixture of both. And by blending laughter with sorrow, playwrights like Shakespeare has revealed the mixed, or you can say unpredictable, nature of human experience. And as we move forward and talk about expressionist drama, instead of showing the world as it is, expressionist playwrights try to show the world as it feels. Their dreamlike settings, exaggerated characters, and emotional intensity, all these elements together reflected the inner struggle, or you can say modern life. And finally, we had drama of ideas, which demonstrate that stage can also be a place for thinking. So taken together, these three forms show that how drama continues to evolve to meet the need of its time, whether through emotional blending, psychological expression, or intellectual debate. Each form expanded what theatre can do and how audience can experience it. So in the end, all dramatic forms remind us that drama is not just entertainment, but it is a living art that helps us to understand ourselves, our society, and the complex world we inhabit. So that's all about today's lecture. Thank you for listening. See you in the next lecture.